afternoon. It is time for some performance art. Edgar Allan Poe. 4 stories. There you go. Let's check it out.
This is going to be the Pale Blue Eye. Bonus points if you can tell me what story this is from.
And your show is about to start. They come with 4 drinks because there's 4 stories. This is the Pale Blue Eye. Look, there's an eyeball in my drink. Actually, it's a blueberry. So, anyway, cheers. Lemony.
Friends, good afternoon and welcome into the Edgar Allan Poe Speakeasy. To properly make your acquaintance, my name is Juliet and I will be your Poe historian guiding you throughout our spirited journey. We just kindly ask in return that you do not utilize flash. You do not distract those seated nearby you, nor do you ever distract our Poe-formers at any point in time. Come on, that was good. Yeah, there we go, my friends. Much better, much better. Now, I believe that it is high time that we begin. Let us commence. Edgar Allan Poe. Over a century and a half past his death in 1849, no one else is as synonymous with mystery and macabre literature as he. Truly a master of words. Edgar Allan Poe is largely attributed with being the very first American author to earn a living through writing exclusively. And as a result, my friends, he's a very poor man. Fiscally speaking, it kind of goes with the territory. Now, in his more personal facets of life, it is plagued by copious amounts of illness, disease, and much death. Perhaps it is for these reasons that reading his work, or better yet, seeing it brought to life off the page and onto the stage, that one starts to walk a fine line in our minds between the petrifyingly plausible, but yet also impossible at the same time. Pure madness, as it were. Now, this afternoon, we are going to proudly present forth 4 of his most beloved works in our own creative adaptation. With that being said, at the conclusion of each piece, you are more than welcome to show your appreciation for our actors and for their craft. This means that when they conclude, you are allowed to hoot, to holler, to shriek, to wail, whatever you feel moved or compelled to do. You don't have to sit there like crickets when they're done, okay? Now, you have our permission to make noise and to have fun with us this afternoon. And in return, I promise you that every single piece does indeed come from the heart. And with this, we proudly present our very first tale, the Telltale Heart. Enjoy.
It's true. I am nervous. Very dreadfully nervous, but how can you call me mad? Listen and observe how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say when first the idea entered my brain, for I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. I think it was his eye. Yes, that was it. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. The sound of the old man's heartbeat. It grew louder and louder. The old man's terror must have been extreme. But still the beating grew. Louder, louder. I thought the heart must burst. But now, a new fear seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's time had come. With a loud yell, I opened the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once, only once. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. But for many moments, his heart beat on with a muffled sound until finally, it ceased. The old man was dead. His eye would trouble me no more. No! They heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. But anything was better than this agony, anything more tolerable than this. I could bear their smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die, and still the sound grew. Louder, 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 louder. All right. Taunt me no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here. Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart.
Okay, now we get a next performance, the cat's meow. And the drink is right here. This one I like. Just a little bit of bourbon. Cuts down on the sweetness. It's overly sweet. But this one's good. Delicious.
Now, during this very formative time frame, eventually his foster mother starts to fall a bit ill. Now, the disease that will claim her life goes by the name of... You are learning. Now, this leaves Edgar quite at odds with his foster father, so much so that he's actually encouraged to move out and to enroll at West Point. But he only lasts a few short months at the academy before he quickly realizes that this is not quite the career path for him. Instead, he much preferred to spend his days at his humble writing desk, scrawling for hours at a time on end. He starts to recluse away from any kinds of peers, and instead he finds companionship within the company of animals. Now, you will notice that animals are very much a central theme to much of Edgar's work, and this next piece is no exception. We proudly present forth the Black Cat. Enjoy. Order in this court. Let us now recount this heinous crime in its entirety. You may proceed, but please start from the beginning.
For this most wild narrative I'm about to tell, I neither expect nor do I solicit belief. For tomorrow I die, and today I wish to unburden my soul. And my main purpose is to lay out a series of mere household events that have terrified me and destroyed me altogether. I was quite young when I first married. My bride, she saw my love of domesticated pets, and she stopped at nothing to procure as many as she could for me. We had birds and rabbits, goldfish, a fine dog, a small monkey even, and a cat. And now this cat was a beautiful animal. He was enormous, and he was entirely jet black. I named him Pluto, and he became the one that I liked most. My wife, however, she was a bit superstitious, so she would joke that he was a witch in disguise. So I alone fed him. And he followed me around everywhere I went, even in the streets. And this friendship of ours, it lasted in this peaceful manner for several years. That is, until I began to change for the worse. I grew moodier, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I couldn't help it. I had this demon in me growing. Day by day, it got stronger and it took hold of me. I never meant to hurt anyone. But I started to drink more and more, much more than I ever should have. And then one day I came home, intoxicated, from my local tavern, and I noticed that Pluto, he was avoiding me. And it upset me. So I seized him. And rightfully so, in his fear, he bit me. Just a small little bite on the top of my hand, but the fury of a demon instantly took over me. And so I grabbed him by the neck. I went into my waistcoat pocket and I pulled out a small pocket knife. And I opened it. And then I deliberately gouged out one of his eyes. And what made matters even worse was that the next day, when the sun was up and I could see him in the light, I noticed that he too was missing an eye. I began to loathe this creature. But he loved me. He would follow me around everywhere I went. He would be underneath my feet, nearly tripping me. And I would sit down to read or write, and he would be right there, underneath my feet, or writing. And he'd jump up on my lap. I was disgusted. He was foul. And then one day, my wife, she called me down to the cellar. And as I was walking down this steep set of stairs, this beast, he got underneath me and he nearly tripped me. I almost landed flat on my face. And so I grabbed the axe off the wall and I swung it at him. But I missed. My wife, she was too quick. She stopped me from landing a fatal blow on this monster. It would have been rid of him. He would have been dead. And I was enraged by her interruption. And so I took that same axe and I slammed it into her brain. She fell dead on the spot without a breath. Nothing suspicious here. This house is a fine house, I said. These walls are strong. And in that moment, I hit the walls with my stick. And the reverberations of my blows, they finally settled. And it got quiet, just for a moment. And then we heard a cry. It grew into a scream. It was a wailing. It sounded like the screaming of the damned in pure agony. Ah! And then the police, they stared at each other in silence for just a small moment. And then all together, they started ripping the wall apart, only to reveal my wife's dead body. And on her head, a fiery red eye, a mouth gaping open, smelling of rotting flesh. It was the cat. It was that damn cat! He was the one who convinced me to do this. He was the one who made me commit this heinous crime. And now I'm sentenced to death by the hangman. And I have walled that monster up in the tomb.
And it's round 3. This one is Nevermore. 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 And here's the peach, orange blossom infused vodka. Blue, I think. Yeah, it's okay. I still like the milk one better. It's sweet.
As Edgar grows older, His writing grows stronger. The year is now 1836, and Edgar enters into perhaps what is now the most blissful time in his life. You see, he has fallen in love. Romantic, right? Now, the lucky lady in question, she goes by the name of Virginia Clem. And at the time of their marriage, Edgar is indeed 27 years of age, and Miss Virginia is indeed 13 years of age. But wait, there's more. You see, they're also first cousins as well. And as strange and unusual as a marriage such as this might be considered in modern times, rest assured that back in the day, a union like this would have been considered weird back then too. So we can just gloss over this whole segment together, my friends, and we can all move past it. But this blissful time is so very short-lived. You see, as Miss Virginia starts to climb into her early 20s, eventually she starts to fall a bit ill. Now, she stops leaving the house as frequently as she used to. She then stops leaving their bedroom chamber as frequently as she used to until finally she is bedridden. The year is now 1845, and Edgar has just finished penning a poem that he will sell to a local paper for a grand total of $9. Now, in today's standards, that's about $350, give or take. But this piece will be harshly criticized by many, because now not only are animals a central theme to much of Edgar's work, but also the untimely death of young women becomes a theme as well. Now, folks start to argue that he's actually rushing his wife into this early grave by touching on these sinister topics, but it's simply not true. It's just the progression of the disease. And the disease that will indeed claim that Miss Virginia Clem's life goes by the name of... Regrettably, yes. Oh, you're sinister, my day drinkers. I see we find humor in death now. But this next piece, my loves, this next piece is perhaps Edgar's way of grappling with this idea that he's about to lose the love of his life. Perhaps he's envisioning what those late night hours might start to feel like without her by his side. What any kind of late night scratching in the glass or perhaps a tapping at their chamber door might start to make one's mind run wild. Without further ado, up next we proudly present arguably his most famous piece of work. This is indeed The Raven.
Once, upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary, as I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone gently rapping on my chamber door. Must be some visitor, I muttered, rapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Distinctly, I remember, it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember cast its ghost upon the floor. Vainly, I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow for my lost Lenore, remainless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terror never felt before. So that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis just some midnight visitor knocking at thy chamber door." Yes, it is. Nothing more. Then presently, my soul grew stronger, hesitating here no longer. "Sir," I said, or "Madam, your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so faintly you were tapping, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into the darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore. As I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word. Merely this, nothing more. Back into my chambers turning, all my soul within me burning. Suddenly, again, a tapping, louder, than before. Surely, said I, surely that is something at my window lattice. Let my heart be calm a moment and this mystery explore. 'Tis just the wind, nothing more. Open wide I drew the shutters, and with many flirts and flutters in there stepped a stately raven from the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a moment stopped or stayed, but perched upon the bust of Pallas just above my door. Perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling by the grim and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thou crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven. Tell me what thy lordly name is upon the night's plutonium shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Startled by the silence broken by replies so aptly spoken, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then into the velvet sinking, I betook myself to thinking what this ominous bird of yore could mean in croaking nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed by some unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floors. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath sent thee. By this angel he hath lent thee respite, and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Drink, oh drink this kind nepenthe, and forget thy loss, Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet yet, if bird or devil, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Eden it should find the saintly maiden whom the angels call Lenore. Quoth the raven, evermore. Now be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked upstarting. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door, and quoth the raven, nevermore. And that bird, never flitting, still is sitting upon the pallid bust of Pallas just above my door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's who is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming cast his shadow upon the floor. And my soul, from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor, it shall be lifted nevermore.
And now we're in the last story. The Raven was good. This is Cocktail of Red Death. Cocktail of Red Death.
Cheers.
And have some Red Death.
Cheers.
Raspberry.
My friends, how are we enjoying our final libations? Oh, you're much louder now than when we first met, I'll have you know. I wonder what changed. My friends, that was a rhetorical question, but I love the enthusiasm nonetheless. Now, Edgar carries on alone in the world with no partner left by his side. And in his time of strife, he starts to drink more heavily than ever before. By day drinkers. He starts to drink so much that he is found on a fateful October night in 1849. A few passerbys notice him, and he's speaking in just mumbled thoughts, wearing clothes not his own. And this concerns them so much that they call out for medical attention, but when they rush to Edgar's side, they find it's too late. And he succumbs to what is ailing him just a few short days later while in hospital. Now, to this very day, his precise cause of death is a widely debated topic. And while many theories do indeed swirl about, no one has ever officially identified the cause. Now, I believe that's how Edgar might like it. One last final mystery for us to talk about all of these years later, but as Edgar does indeed exit the mortal realm at the ripe old age of 40, into frame comes a new character. This person will become known as the Poe Toaster. And on the eve of Edgar's birthday, every single year for the next 50 years, this anonymous individual will leave behind 3 loose rose stems, the sake for your garnish in this final cocktail, as well as a half-drunken bottle of cognac just at the base of his tombstone. Now, to this very day, it also remains a mystery as to whether or not this Poe Toaster either consumed half this cognac before gifting it, or if they presumably Poed one out for their homie. I told you the jokes don't get better. Now, my friends, one thing is for certain, one day all of us too shall die. But we can all hope to leave behind a legacy as phenomenal as Edgar Allan Poe. And with this, we proudly present our final tale of the evening, or afternoon, I should say. And this is perhaps our most sinister yet. This is indeed The Mask of Red Death. Cheers, enjoy, I'll meet you at the very, very end.
The Red Death had long been feeding on the country. Never had a sickness been so deadly, so great a killer, or so fearful to see. Blood was its mark, along with sharp pains, the mind running in circles inside the head. Then there was bleeding through the skin, though it was not cut or broken. And then death. Arguably, it was worse than COVID. Now, the bright red spots upon the body, and especially the face of the sick man, made others turn away in fear, and no one would dare help. And the entire sickness itself, from beginning to end, lasted no more than half an hour. Imagine starting to die at the beginning of a Seinfeld episode. You get where I'm going with that. But when Prospero, the ruler of the land, had learned that half the people of his land had died, he called him 1,000 healthy, happy friends to come away and live with him in a faraway palace he owned. There, he supplied everything his guests would need for pleasure. There was music, dancing, food to eat, and cocktails to drink. Cocktails to drink. Last one's a doozy, guys. This is a classical interpretation. Now, within the palace walls, his guests remained safe. They could forget the sickness, the Red Death, and they would leave the outside world to care for itself. When 5 months passed, Prospero gathered his friends for a great masquerade ball to lift spirits. They were to don their finest clothes and wear their finest masks. This was a scene of great richness, this masquerade. And it was rumored that Olive Garden had catered. You love me. There were 7 rooms through which Prospero's friends danced. Each room had 3 tall, pointed windows of colored glass, each matching the room itself. The first room had blue cloth hangings, and thusly blue were its windows. The second room had hangings of purple.
Yeah.
Purple. And purple were its windows. The third, green. Don't wait for it, we're on a budget. 4th, yellow. The 5th of white, and the 6th of violet. But the last room was black. Black as night. With heavy black cloth on the floor. Except these windows indeed did not match. They were red. A deep blood color for back. Each room cast a strange light indeed, coloring the shapes and faces of the dancers inside, so much so that few dared to enter the red room, for fear of the terribly familiar sight of the Red Death she bore. Now in this red room stood a great majestic clock of black wood. Gently it marked the seconds as they passed, but at the top of each hour it spoke in a deep, rich tone as beautiful as music, but ever so strange, that the music and dancing would stop, and the few who dared enter the red room would stand transfixed each time it went off. Nevertheless, It was a beautiful, happy masquerade. As the dancers danced softly through the rooms and through the hours of the night, at the top of each hour, the clock began to strike. It's kind of like a sinister Dr. Seuss. Because it rhymed, it's okay. You're on your fourth cocktail. Every time the clock would strike, again, the music stopped, and the dancers would stand without moving, admiring the slow striking sound. But before the clock stopped again, many of the dancers noticed that in the first room, the blue room, a strange masquerader they had not seen before. Fresh meat. That's also originally from the poem. You're fun. So they noticed this masquerader, and at first they were whispering and muttering, and there was just this general feeling of surprise. But then fear spread through them, followed by sickening horror. Now, to be clear, in a crowd such as this, one had to be a very strange masquerader, dressed so oddly to elicit such a feeling. This man was tall and very thin. Perhaps he was on Ozempic. This is scary. From head to foot, he was dressed in a dead man's clothes prepared for the grave. And the mask he wore was so much like that of a dead man's that one could scarcely tell the difference even up close. And yet all this may have been fine, except the dancers soon realized this stranger was dressed as the Red Death itself. Scary. His clothes were covered in blood. The mask he wore spotted with terrible dried red spots, or perhaps indeed it was his face. When Prospero learned this, he ran toward him in the blue room and cried out, "Who dares? Take him, seize him! Pull off his mask at once, so we may know who we must hang at sunrise." Some joined, but they stopped in fear, and no one dared lay a hand on this stranger. The strange figure then turned and started to move into the second room, passing Prospero, who stood still, surprised. The figure then gently moved forward, creeping with a slow, steady, measured step. And without being stopped, he moved from the blue room to the purple room, from the purple to the green to the yellow to the white, and then to the violet, and finally to the black and red room. Now, no one dared follow him, except for Prospero, who ran to him with a sharp knife high over his head, ready to strike the stranger dead. But when he was within a few feet of him, this figure slowly turned, firmly looking Prospero in the eyes. A moment later, there was a cry, and the knife fell shining on the black floor, upon which a moment later, Prospero too fell, dead. Now all the masqueraders rushed into the red room, and the strongest of them attempted to seize this intruder. But when they reached for him, they realized inside his grave clothes, there was no human form, no body at all, nothing. Now, the guests had realized it was the Red Death itself that had come in the night. One by one, the dancers fell and each died as they hit the ground. Then the fires died. Then the clock stopped ticking. And darkness and decay and the Red Death ruled forever over all.
We really hope you had a marvelous time with us, yes? Well, that comes first and foremost to us, my friends. We do not take it very lightly that you got so very dressed up and you chose to come here and day drink with us, my friends. A very admirable feat. Now, my friends, as you can assuredly see, in the back you'll see our lovely performers standing there. They've been working so very hard for you. Give them one last final screech.
All right, Edgar Allan Poe. We got 4 cocktails. This is the Pale Blue Eye. This is Nevermore. And this is the Red Death. Those are vodka base. I like this one. Catch me out. Bourbon base.